Hey folks, Dale Davidson here, the Dear VA Guy. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We're glad you're here. Thank you to all the veterans and your spouses. We're talking about two critical dates in order to determine your back pay amount. So when you have applied for disability benefits with the VA, you often hear this term back pay. We're going to discuss a little bit about what exactly is back pay and are you eligible, and then we're going to focus on two specific dates. It's the date the VA actually received your claim, and the second date that we're concerned with is the date that your claim arose. Those are two different dates, and we're going to discuss that and how that impacts your back pay. So what is back pay? So back pay refers to benefits that you are owed retroactively during the time of your initial application for compensation. So you file your claim, and then it takes time to process, and then hopefully you're approved. So you may be entitled to receive payments for a period from your application date to the approval date. And this amount is crucial for you and for really all veterans, because a lot of times you're struggling financially while awaiting the decision. And it takes time. I mean, I've seen disability claims take 3-4 years. Don't know why, but it does. So let's talk about eligibility for back pay. To qualify for back pay, you've got to meet some specific criteria. You've got to have, number one, an approved disability claim. Okay, so you must have a claim that is a disability claim that has been approved by the VA. All right, so you got to have an effective date, and that is typically the date the VA receives your claim or the date you became disabled, whichever is later. Okay, this date determines how far back the VA can or will pay you benefits. And then you've got to have that continuous eligibility, of course. In order to be disabled, you've got to continue to be disabled. You can't just be disabled one day and cured the next. That's not how it works. You must continue to meet the eligibility criteria for your disability from the date of your application until the date your claim is approved. Now, the VA typically pays disability comp retroactively to the effective date of your claim. So the effective date of your claim varies depending on several factors. Generally, the VA will pay retroactive benefits starting from the date you filed your claim. This means if you filed a claim, let's say January 1 of this year, and it's approved in June of this year, you would receive back pay from January 1 of this year to the date your claim was approved. A lot of times with the VA, not just compensation, but VA pension or the aid and attendance is they'll pay you back to the effective date of your claim, which is, in our example, was January 1 of this year. So if you're newly separated, so within 1 year of your date of separation, if you file a disability claim as to your military service, the VA may backdate your compensation to the day after you were discharged. This is to account for the time that you were no longer receiving military pay. So if today I was discharged and tomorrow I file a claim, they would pay me back, however long it took them to process my claim, they'd pay me back to tomorrow. A lot of times we're looking at retroactive pay with appeals and errors that involve your claim. So if an appeal is granted or a claim is reopened due to new evidence, the VA can award you back pay based upon the original effective date of the initial claim if it was filed within the appropriate time frame. That's why it's so important that if you get documentation or you're getting a notice from the VA saying that your claim is denied, that you look very carefully at that letter and make sure that you get whatever kind of appeal done in a timely fashion in order to save your original date. or if they ask you for additional information, to give you a time frame in which to give them that additional information, that additional evidence, get them that information and evidence. Otherwise, you'll lose the initial date. The initial date is very, very important in order to preserve your right to retroactive or back pay. So the general rule for an original or initial claim for benefit is that the effective date is the date the VA received your claim, or the date that your entitlement to the benefit arose, whichever is later. The effective date when they receive the claim, that's easy to determine. If you go to a VSO and you file it electronically today, the effective date of your claim is today. If you mail it, the effective date is the date that they receive your claim. And I would suggest that if you do mail, you can't really trust the post office, okay, but mail it so that you have some kind of way to track it, say an overnight or certified mail or something, so that you know that they got your claim, okay. They've been known to lose things, you know. So that's the effective date that the VA received it. Let me step back a little bit, because I really want to focus in on these dates, because that's very, very important. So the general rule for your claim or a reopened claim for benefits is the effective date. That's the date the VA received the reopened claim, as opposed to the original claim. So you can have an original claim that was closed, and for whatever reason you didn't provide them the evidence or whatever, and so they've closed your claim. Now you've appealed it and you want them to reopen your claim. Two different dates, all right? So in this instance, the effective date of the claim is the date your entitlement to the benefit arose, whichever is later. It's certainly not going to be your original date, because the date was closed. It could be your date that the claim was reopened, or it could be the date that your claim arose. So you see how important it is to make sure that you comply and communicate with the VA and get them the documentation they request, okay? Let's talk about a reopened claim. If the VA grants your petition or your request to reopen the claim for benefits that has previously been finally denied, the general rule prohibits the VA from assigning the date it received the original claim for the benefit in question as the effective date. So just toss out the initial claim effective date, because now we're going to be focusing on the date the claim was reopened, or the date in which your claim arose, okay? To receive an effective date that the VA received the original claim, you've got to file and win on your appeal. Whatever you're filing with the VA, you got to win that in order to get back to the original decision date. If you can't win that, then you're back to the reopening date. So the general rule for a claim to increase your rating of an already service-connected disability is that the effective date is the date the VA received your claim for the increase. Or, there's always an or the date the entitlement arose, which means the date the disability increased in severity, whichever is later. So let's talk about supplemental claims. You've been denied for whatever reason, but you want to have or submit additional evidence. The question is, what date controls? The key fact that controls is whether or not you allowed the time to expire between the denial, the initial denial, and the filing of the supplemental claim, or the date the VA received the supplemental claim. So here we are, we've got the original claim, we've been denied, we wait, we lose that date, we file a supplemental claim. The question is, can we get that original date back? And it depends on if you win that supplemental claim or not. So again, it's better not to lose the date, okay? At first glance, you say, oh gosh, why wouldn't it just, isn't it kind of simple that the day my claim arose is basically the day that the VA received my claim? Well, it's not that simple. So, and usually there's no dispute regarding when the VA received your claim or your communication. Rather, the dispute arises as to whether or not your claim or your communication is actually a claim or not. So that's why, again, it's important if you're going to file a claim that you file it on the correct form. If you need help with the correct form, by all means, go to your local VSO office and they can help you. They can file those claims online through their systems. Gone are the days where we used to file informal claims. Now, we can file an intent to file a claim, but we cannot file informal claims, okay? Because that was getting the VA in too many arguments with respect to, well, is it an actual claim or just a communication? So clearly it's going to be a claim if you file it on the 526 EZ, okay? Just make sure you fill it out completely. So let's discuss the general rules for determining the date that your entitlement to the benefit in question arose. When did your claim arise? Because that's the date that often gets confused, because the VA is going to look at the date that they received it or the date in which your claim arose, whichever is later. So if the VA awards benefits based on an initial claim, including a claim for increase in disability ratings, say, then the general rule is that the effective date is the date the VA received the initial claim or the date the entitlement to the benefit arose, again, whichever is later. So this is the general rule. So whether the award is made on the initial claim by the regional office or appealed by a higher level reviewer or the Board of Veterans Appeals or U.S. Court of Appeals. Next, okay, if the VA awards benefits based upon a supplemental claim, that is, a claim for the same benefits that have previously been denied, then you have issues whether your claim was informal or a formal claim, so be careful. So this second date that's got to be compared with each other date under the general rule on effective dates is, when did your entitlement arise? The date entitlement arose. This is the initial date on which it appears that you satisfied all of the submissive requirements, or all of the substantive criteria for entitlement for the benefit, as determined by a review of all the evidence. So your claim arose when the VA has all the evidence and is able to make a decision on your claim. So date of entitlement, or the date your claim arose, focuses upon, one, the date your disability first manifested itself, and two, the date entitlement to benefits was authorized by law and regulation. You may have the disability, but you still got to prove the disability, in other words. So in making the determination of whether your entitlement arose, it does not matter when any of the evidence was submitted. It only matters what all of the evidence shows. You may have submitted evidence 3-4 years ago that doesn't matter what you submitted. What does matter is that what did all that medical evidence and everything else that you submitted show? If it showed 4 years ago that you were entitled to that disability benefit, then 4 years ago is when your entitlement date arose. So a lot of times your date that the VA received and the date your entitlement arose is one and the same, because you've already hopefully submitted a fully developed claim and you've got all of your medical evidence that clearly shows of your disability. You've got your nexus statement in there saying that I hurt my back jumping out of perfectly good airplanes, and here's all my medical records, and I was treated at the base hospital or whatever it was. And you've got your doctor's opinions. If you put all that together and submit it to the VA, that's the date that we're concerned with, okay? And that's the date that you'd be paid back to, even if it took them 3 or 4 years to go through all your medical evidence. So, in many claims for VA-connected disability compensation, the date entitlement arose is often the date you were discharged from military service. But remember that 1 year, you got to file within 1 year, okay? Regardless of when the date received your claim. But you got to have, it's the 1 year requirement. But let me give you an example. Okay, so you got a claim for disability comp for a back condition that was granted because medical evidence shows that you sustained a back injury while in service. Again, jumping out of perfectly good airplanes. Okay, you currently have a back injury, and your current back injury is the same as the one incurred in service. So the date of entitlement first arose is the date of discharge from military service. Plain and simple. So on the other hand, the date of entitlement to compensation first arose is usually many years after service. Okay, many years after your discharge. On the other hand, the date that entitlement to compensation first arose is usually many years after discharge in both claims involving latent diseases, such as, and the latent diseases I'm talking about, diseases that take time to develop, cancers, PTSD, those kinds of things take time to develop a lot of times. And claims involving secondary injuries or diseases, these are injuries that are related to your service-connected injury, such as, well, let's say you have a back injury which causes you hip problems, which causes you knee problems. So the hip and knee problems are caused by your back issue. So you've got those secondary injuries. Those develop as a result of your primary injury or disease that's already been service-connected. So let me give you an example of that. So the date entitlement arose in a compensation claim, let's say for PTSD, is the date the evidence in the record shows that you first suffered from PTSD, which may be many years after discharge and after the traumatic events took place. Often this date is the date of the first medical diagnosis of PTSD, unless a medical opinion states that you suffered from PTSD prior to that date. Notice you've got to have a diagnosis. You may have been treated for PTSD. You may have been prescribed medication related to your PTSD. But if you don't have a medical diagnosis, you don't have PTSD according to the VA. You might have some other mental issue, but you don't have a diagnosis. Boy, how's a tough one. So, hey, thank you for sticking with me through this, because these dates, you can get really tangled up in them. But they're very, very important to understand in determining what your back pay or your retroactive pay, or whatever you want to call it, is determined. So, hey, look, check out this video, Expert Tips for Calculating Your VA Disability Rating, for more information. And until next time, you have a blessed day.